Greetings and bienvenue, midnight crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast. And welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Haven't posted this since a few months back. This didn't happen to me. Also, I won't be green-texting. I do apologize for my English. I'm a native Spanish and Italian speaker. My family owns a big-ass farm in northern Peru. We've been there since 1870 with some of the first Italian colonies in the country. This farm is so big it has its own forest, where fucked up shit always happens. My family found Inca ruins that they had to destroy in order to keep the government out of our lands, drug dealers' corpses left out in the woods, parts of human bodies, etc. It's a very fucked up place since there's virtually non-police authorities in there for most of the time, and the little there is are always corrupt police officers and so, but the most fucked up story is that of my uncle during the 1940s, who fought the devil in person but it was saved by a pack of guardian dogs that roams the farm during the night. Apparently every time he punched the devil or shooted at him it didn't took any damage from him, he only got scared by the dogs. It was such a big deal that it became a legend among the locals. Well, it was during the 1940s in Peru. At that time we were having a war against Ecuador and big farm producers were having the time of their lives making supply contracts with the government. Since my family settled in Lima, capital of the country since the 1930s, they needed to send someone from the family to take care of business. My great-grandpa decided he was sending his eldest son Enrico, my uncle. It's a long story, is very eerie, more an Innawood story than a Nope story. But interesting for those who believe in brujeria and pacts with the devil. Being charged with that task, Enrico traveled to the farm. This farm is located near a town called Guadalupe in the province of La Libertad. Guadalupe is a poor town and a lot of people from there used to, and still do, work for us. At the arrival of Enrico lots of people talked to him about some strange shit happening in the farm, like animals dying inexplicable, and some workers dying in strange accidents. In order to make things worse, the capataz, the manager of the farm, told my uncle that he found pictures of our family members in the forest. Among these things he also found some typical black candles made of animal fat and typical brujeria shit. Brujeria is some form of santeria that involves pacts with the devil and is usually performed by a shaman or black priest. Enrico being the badass he thought he didn't give a fuck about those things and began to put some order, laying some suspects off their duties. Some weeks passed and Enrico noticed that these farm animals' deaths became more and more common. He got the animals checked by a veterinarian but apparently there was nothing wrong with them. He put some security in the stables at night but the animal were found dead in the morning. It got worse at the point that the family had to buy more animals from other farms in order to make the quota of the supply contracts. Enrico was getting angrier and he decided to make night rounds around the farm himself with some of their employees. When I say this farm is big I mean is really fucking big, like 500 square kilometers. And now is even bigger since we start buying some other farms around. At one point the property had its own railroad with a functioning train. Well, no matter what precautions Enrico took, shit happened there on a daily basis. Pic related. It's a pic of the farm. That hill, small mountain you see in the background is also part of it. It holds a small church, a radio antenna for the local radio station, some pig and horse stables and a monument for the fallen during the 70s and 80s terrorism period we had here in Peru. One day shit got out of control. This time it wasn't an animal death that put on the alarm at the entire farm. The capataz was found dead in the edge of the farm woods. I read about this particular death in some of the newspaper's archive of the farm and asked my father, Enrico's brother, just to clarify who is who in the story, about it. He said that the capataz was attacked by a mountain lion because of the nature of his wounds. Dude was ripped apart. But no mountain lions have been seen in that part of the country for ages, so I don't know. Pieces of this story will start to make sense as I write it. Enrico took extreme measures. He went to the local chairman and told him what was happening in the farm since his arrival. The chairman asked for permission to take a look of the property, and after that he came to the conclusion that the family was cursed. In Brujeria there is a particular, I don't know how to call it, spell or pact with the devil, where you can summon the devil itself or a demon to kill a person in exchange of your soul. I guess is the typical pact of your average Satanist. We never knew who made this pact. We suspect other farmers around that claimed that some of our property belonged to them. My father personally thinks that the pact was made by some workers since the family at that time kept them in shitty, infrahuman conditions, almost as slaves. Anyway, Enrico asked this chairman what could he do to fix this, to undo this pact. He responded that he could do two things, either die and fulfill the pact or win a battle against him, the demon or devil. It sounds silly, but that's how things are. Since Enrico was a badass who didn't believe in any of this bullshit, he continued to make his night rounds. But this time he took some of the guardian dogs with him in case shit got real. As I told you guys before, what happened to him eventually became a local legend, so take it as you wish. I used to believe it was all bullshit to scare me and my cousins to fuck shit up or to escape at night while we were visiting the farm. But through the years and some creepy shit I've seen happening in that place, convinced me that there is a great chance that this was all true. Enrico went out this particular night by himself to make his rounds alone. Don't know why really. I know there were some employees making their night round at the other side of the farm as usual. This time he took some guardian dogs with him. He decided to cross the mountain to get to the woods where they found the farm animals' corpses. Enrico was a big guy, a very muscular macho kind of guy. Since we are all tall in my family, I guess Enrico was about 190 centimeters 6'2" or maybe taller. He was arrogant too. My father told me that he was a piece of shit, but at least at that time, everyone in the family thought that he was kind-hearted and just a spoiled kid. Anyway, he crossed the mountain with his horse and dogs and went into the woods. At this point the dogs began to feel uneasy, with some of them crying. I mean, big guardian dogs completely turning into pussies in a matter of seconds. He continued heading east in order to make it out of the woods. That would take him at least an hour or two, but finally he made it. As he begun to go out of the woods he saw a chalan. A chalan is a typical farm worker of the north of Peru. By tradition they all dress in white pants, white shirt and a big white cape kind of poncho like to protect them when it's cold, and most important a big hat like a Mexican sombrero. You can Google chalan if you want. Enrico saw this guy dressed as a chalan, but there was something really odd about him. First, his clothes were not white but all black and he was sporting boots with silver points on them. Second, he wasn't the typical average North Peruvian guy. The typical Peruvian guy looks like a Mexican with tan skin and really dark hair and short if not midget-sized. Third, when Enrico looked at this guy's face he noticed that, besides being a handsome kind of Nordic or Slavic guy, his teeth were all gold. The overall look of this guy as imagine was like a Slav gangsta dressed as Versus of Versus from Vendetta. A really tall guy with some racial features not usual to that part of the country. At this point the dogs were shitting themselves and began to back off and run away from there. Enrico got his shit together and asked the guy who he was and what he was doing on his property. The guy didn't say anything, he only got out of his horse and began to walk towards Enrico without making an expression. Enrico pointed at him with his hunting rifle and shot at his chest. Guess what? Nothing happened. When he realized what he was dealing with, he tried to get on his horse but the animal went crazy and ran away too. He tried to punch this guy, but as he told the family, every time he punched him in the stomach or the face it felt like he was punching a pillow. Nothing would happen to this guy. When this guy attacked Enrico he would only push him with incredible force. Like he wasn't trying to hurt him while doing it, he was only demonstrating his force as he wanted to scare him. This would go on for a while, and every time Enrico tried to do him some damage it was worthless, and every time this guy attacked Enrico he would only push him several meters away with an incredible force over and over again. Enrico was running out of options, so he asked him what did he wanted from him. The guy responded to him, "Your damned family." As this story has been told in our family since it happened, much of this details are not very clear to me. I only know that when Enrico was getting tired of fighting him, either he gave up and faced the fact that he was going to die, or this guy grabbed him, almost putting him down on the floor. The thing is that Enrico was being held against the ground, and saw this guy pulling a silver knife out of his cape or poncho, ready to stab him to death, when Enrico called his dogs by whistle. At this moment the dogs came out of the woods, seeing his master being about to get fucked up, and manned themselves up to defend him. My dad says that when the guy saw the dogs charging at him he got up like a motherfucker and began to scream with an unnatural voice. Whatever the fuck that means, the dogs took him down and attacked him. The guy just disappeared, leaving his black cape behind. Enrico was found the next morning at the edge of the wood. He passed out due to all that shit he saw. The police tried to find the guy and looked for him for weeks, but they found nothing or no one that matches his description. Enrico packed his shit up and left Lima, never to return to the farm again. In fact, after that, the family took about 20 years to return to the farm, only visiting for short periods of time to take care of the business. But what is important in this story is that Enrico was during his lifetime a fucking douchebag. He always cheated on his wife, he repeatedly hit his children and wife too, he got to be president of an important bank in Peru only to be imprisoned for fraud. He even ripped off his own family, so when the devil or a demon shows in front of you, maybe it is not because you were the nicest person ever. But that's not it. Enrico died years later in the 60s in the most fucked up way you can imagine. The family won't talk about it that much, but Enrico was found in his beach house stabbed in the face to death. Robbery was ruled out by authorities since nothing of value was taken out of the house. Whatever the fuck happened to Enrico, it remains unclear to this day. They didn't found signs of struggle in his house or nothing like that. Also, no doors were jammed or found broken. It couldn't be a family member or a friend since his house was very well protected and security said no one was there with him during that day. His story is now a local legend. Some locals said they have seen that man dressed as a black Shalon fucking around the farm. What worries me most was what he said, "I want your damned family."
Peruvian here. I live in the south of the country, and there's a lot of stories that I've heard mostly from friends that come from the rural towns to study at college in the city. Here's some. Have a friend, let's call him E. He lived in a town called Tarata that's about 2 hours from the city. It's a small town, but well known because of its traditions and folklore. Friend lives with his whole family, dad and mom, brothers and sister, and grandma and granddad. Whole family comes from military tradition, so they were very strict, especially granddad. He is still a child about 7 to 8 years old when his granddad tells him the story about the death, La Parca. The story goes like this: when you hear the sound of chains, someone in the neighborhood is going to die. He gets really scared and starts to cry. Granddad calls him a pussy. Some months later, when he is at school, he returns to his home, has lunch with his family, and Granddad starts to talk about how he could hear the sound of chains in the morning. Starts to make fun about how the death is going to come after him. Everyone laughs. Next day Granddad wakes up dead, and no one has a clue why. He's just dead. They have a funeral, everyone is sad and confused about Grandpa's death. Some weeks later strange things start to happen to E. He says someone is calling for him, with an adult male voice.
"Come here, E. Let's go. Follow me."
He ignores the voice because it doesn't sound familiar. But one day, he is at his living room with his grandma. And hears the voice coming from his backyard.
"Come here, E. Let's go. Follow me."
Is it your dad calling you?
His grandma says. He goes to the backyard saying I'm coming and falls unconscious for a couple seconds. Wakes up and grandma is carrying him and he can hear her saying,
Motherfucker. Go back to the place you belong. You are dead. Go back and never return again.
He turns his head to where she is shouting and clearly sees his granddad there. He still remembers is how his granddad looked before vanishing. It gives him the most horrific smile that he has ever seen. Later he was brought to a sorcerer, curandero, so he can give him a cleanse, limpia, with the kiwi. He rubs the kiwi all around his body, and when the ritual is over he opens the kiwi with a knife. Just to discover that all the insides in the kiwi have turned black.
Story from my substitute teacher when I was in high school. Been years since then, but that story is something that I always remember. Teacher is young, and was transferred to the north of Peru, in the Amazon in a very small town. Has made friends with the locals. They tell him a lot of stories about the spirits in the rainforest and how you have to respect them. Teacher doesn't mind it too much, until one day, playing football with the locals. Suddenly a low sound can be heard near the trees. Locals stop playing, leaving the teacher confused. Sound is starting to get higher. It sounds like someone is whistling a rare tune. Locals tell the teacher to stand in his place, sit down and to close his eyes. Everyone else does the same. Teacher gets confused but follows their words. Whistles are getting more and more close to them. Teacher starts to feel afraid. The local next to him tells him to not move an inch of his body and to keep his eyes closed. He can hear the sound coming closer and closer, until it passes next to him and then vanishes into the trees. Everyone keeps calm until they can't hear the sound anymore. At the end the people from there told him that maybe it was the spirit of someone who recently died, and that they tried to hide from it so that thing won't steal their souls to keep it company in the afterlife.
There is this story in my village on the Andes. 20 years ago there was this family that grew vicuñas. They were poor so the kid had to help them sometimes. One day the mother left her boy alone because she was tired and needed rest. That day the boy vanished. 15 years later since that day he returned to the village and lives near me. Now you have to consider this as an 8-year-old boy that was in a cold mountain. And this is his story. He was taking care of the vicuñas when some kind of being appeared. It looked like a child but old with wrinkles all over his face, his words, and dressed with a simple chuyo and poncho. Being introduced as a leprechaun, duende, and started asking him questions. How old was he? Why was he there? Where were his parents? And finally if he was bored. The kid answered all the questions because he saw no harm in doing so, and the last one he said that he was indeed bored. The leprechaun grinned and took out a bag full of gold rings. Counted to 101 coins. Gave 50 to the kid and took 50 himself and placed one to the side. He said that they were going to play betting the rings and that if the kid won all the rings would be his. The kid agreed and started playing with him, one different game each time. Hours later his mother started calling him. The kid said he was sorry but he had to go. The leprechaun convinced him that there must be an absolute winner and that if he puts the ring he placed at the side he will become invisible and they can keep playing. The kid put it on. They kept playing until the kid was tired of it. He said that he doesn't care anymore and he was going home. The leprechaun said that it was fine. He managed to kill a little time and they can keep playing later anyway. Took all the rings except the one the kid used and said that was his payment to keep him entertained. He took the kid home and said that he must take the ring off for others to see him. The kid did and he instantly noticed how old he had become. When he wanted an explanation the leprechaun was already gone. The kid looked for his mom and found her. She explained that she had not seen him for 15 years. The kid cried for hours telling the story. Now this guy is almost 30 years old. He has shared the story with the little village telling not to leave kids alone. The only proof he has is the golden ring. He never wears it because he feels if he did he would see the leprechaun by his side wanting to keep playing. Now this is a shame, but when I was offered to wear it I refused because I was too afraid of it, but this is the story, X.
One more Peruvian here. Best stories are from rural areas, the highlands or jungle. Lima, a shit. Anyway, I do not have a long story to share with you guys, but what I do have are some anecdotes. Leprechaun stories are popular here. I had an English teacher who once told the class his sister played with a little old man. The wife of a close cousin used to find her 2-month-old baby down in her cradle. Shit stop once the baby got baptized. Fucking leprechaun should have took him away, he's in scandalous little demon now. Another teacher once told us he used to travel to Loreto regularly to visit his family. As a kid, when he was alone playing in his backyard, he regularly heard a strange voice calling his name. I don't remember exactly if that thing is a demon, a leprechaun, or a witch, but you're not supposed to follow the voice if you get lost in the jungle forever. Personally, I've seen a UFO. It was the classic flying saucer with lights. Mind you, it was in the middle of a city, and I was around 10, so my mind might be tricking me. My dad, he told me once I suffered from a common cold and couldn't sleep well and my spirits were down, but nothing the doctor gave me worked, so they took me to a curandera. Turns out, I had mal de ojo. She passed an egg around my body. The egg supposed to absorb the malus vibras, then throw the egg yolk into a glass filled with water. The egg yolk had some nasty black shit on it. After that happened, I was back to normal.
Continuing with the stories about Peruvian myths, this is about the Kharisiri. The Kharisiri is a kind of sorcerer who is well known for using a kind of narcotic to immobilize his victims and put him to sleep. After putting him to sleep, the Kharisiri use a chirurgical instrument to steal the fat of the victim's body. Since it's not a professional procedure, if the victims don't go to a hospital, most of the time they die. Kharisiris are also well known because they can transform into animals like a dog, a rabbit, or a bird. People believe they have made a pact with the devil to acquire those powers. Now that you know something about them, this is a story that I know because it happened to a relative. Mother's goddaughter is having bad times. At her wedding there was a blackout, so the party was cancelled, and a lot of bad things keep happening to her. Her father is a well-known man in my city, and he knows a lot of people, from respected medics to actual thieves. Someone tells him about a sorcerer who is well known because he practices cleanses that are known to work, but the thing is, that he is very hard to find and to contact. That someone gets paid to find the sorcerer, and after about a month or so, he finally finds him. He reunites with my mother's goddaughter. Let's call her in, her husband and her dad. The sorcerer tells them that he is sorry if it took them too much time to find him, but it's like this, because he keeps hiding from people that are after him. N asks him if it's some kind of sorcerer mafia. Sorcerer says yes, but he can't ask help from the police because they work in some unusual ways. After talking, the sorcerer tells them that they are going to a ranch at the north of the city, in a place where not many people live and somewhat far from the city. They arrive there. The ranch is the property of a friend of the sorcerer. The place has a lot of tall bushes, with crops and everything. They go to the only building in the ranch, and on the roof. Sorcerer wants to have a whole view of the ranch. They start the ceremony. He starts a bonfire, and brings a lot of exotic flowers. He starts explaining that someone has put a curse on N and his husband. Possibly an ex-boyfriend. Sorcerer recognizes the curse. It was put there by an enemy of his. Suddenly they start to hear something. It's the sound of wings. N told us about a big black bird. A gallinazo or vulture if you want, it's near the crops, they see it, and it goes to hide in the tall bushes. Anne and her husband and dad feel the chills, but the sorcerer continues with the ceremony. Suddenly there are more vultures, 3 of them. They are making sounds, and Anne says that it looks like they are looking straight to the sorcerer. Sorcerer still doesn't give any fucks, continues with the ceremony and doesn't say a word about the vultures. Ceremony and cleanse ends after 2 hours, it's getting dark. Vultures are still there. Sorcerer tells Anne to not be afraid, he's going to take care of it. Sorcerer grabs something from his bag and throws it to the bonfire, creating a huge fire. Vultures start to panic and then fly away. Anne asks what the fuck is going on. Sorcerer tells her that they are his rivals. They are Kharisiris. They are the people after him, his rituals and his secrets. They are after him, because he's been interfering with their business. They've been trying to locate him for months. Get him killed, steal his fat and use it for rituals. Some time later, Anne's life is improving. She is grateful to the sorcerer. Recommends him to a lot of people. Impossible to reach him. Been like 3 years and not a word about him. People don't know if he has been killed, or just hidden in another city or country.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.